Hey guys, Ponce here, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about how to beat the level 100 Doom bots. I mean the new and upgraded level 100 Doom bots, not the old ones which are glitched and were something close to level 70. Now, this is a rather in-depth thing. Oddly, there are actually a lot of points that do need to be followed if you want to be successful against these level 100 Doom bots. It's quite difficult. So you just sit back and relax, or you can go to twitch.tv/Ponce, where I'll hopefully be able to do this for you guys live. I'll probably be streaming this as soon as I upload the video. But in any case, in terms of the actual points themselves and sort of the things I've picked up on over the multiple days that I've been playing this mode. To start off, we're going to talk about the absolute basics, and then we'll work our way to slightly more specifics. So, general overview. First thing to note, the Doombots are a work in progress. For example, earlier we thought the old level 100, it said level 100, but it actually turns out it wasn't. It was something closer to level 70. And aside from that, Doombots in general are, again, a work in progress. There's bug fixes and stuff that are going to keep coming in until live. In fact, Riot employee like Twitter messaged me specifically saying, if you want the real Doombots level 100 experience, probably wait until live. But nonetheless, we can garner a lot of points from what we have now. For example, when I was playing the level 70 things, a lot of the points were extremely applicable to the new level 100 bots kind of stuff. So first thing to note, most important thing probably is the bots straight up just have better stats than you. They have more HP, typically have more regen, they'll do more damage than you, their CC is better than yours, so you can't actually trade with them at level 100. Earlier modes, or earlier levels, you can kind of get away with it. Doombots level 100, no, they will, if you go and try and trade damage with them, they will destroy you. The only time you can actually, it's not even a trade, but the only way you could trade with them is if you just avoid their damage to begin with and just hit them. In terms of the strongest bot, Lux bot is by far the strongest bot. Her CC is crazy. Like, she hits one person, her CC chains off to everyone. Her ult can kill you off screen and will kill multiple people with it because it basically goes around in every direction. You've probably seen that one by now if you've seen any footage at all. By the way, I keep looking over this way because this is actually, there's so much stuff I need to go over. I actually have notes, but in any case, melee bots in isolation tend to be easier to deal with. For example, stuff like Amumu and Udyr. Like, so if you get them in lane, yeah, you can poke them out easier. Their strength lies in the fact that they end up working with the team quite well. So that when they get to the late game, they just get horrendously tanky, get tons of damage, and they keep pushing forward and allow the rest of the bots to just kind of dive you and you kind of poke you out, or not even poke you, just I guess outright kill you. You can't really get to them. So yeah, again, the aforementioned Amumu Udyr combo will just dive into a turret. You can't do anything about them, and then you get CC'd to death by Lux from way off screen or something. Malzahar can also be annoying, but he's not. Again, you see him in this game I'm playing here. He's just like a continuous push bot, so he can be quite annoying in that sense. Although individually he's not horrendous. Cho'Gath and Brand tend to be kind of like lesser Luxes, so they're good, but they're better to be facing them than Lux essentially. Also, you absolutely must hit the 20 kill mark. At the 20 kill mark, you will get, I think it's somewhere around 4,000 gold. So I don't remember the exact total. But if you don't get that, especially the level 100 bots, your damage will be insufficient to actually push them out. You need to get that, and the sooner you get the 20 kill mark, the better. Also, penetration is an absolute must for AD carry, or any kind of AD character, essentially. I've been in too many games where the only reason we lost is because the AD carry wasn't paying attention and didn't get penetration, because they will be utterly worthless and do absolutely nothing unless you get penetration before the game ends, at any rate. When you get it depends on the game and who you're fighting a little bit, but typically it'll be around the third item you get as, for example, an AD carry. Sometimes you might even need to do it as second item. I don't think I've ever had a game where you need to get it first. That's a bit excessive, but penetration from mages tends to be a bit more negotiable. It depends on what you're facing again and what champion you are. Some just need penetration more than others. Other than that, we should probably go over Teemo briefly. But I mean, my coverage for Teemo here essentially is going to be don't worry about Teemo, more or less. If your primary concern is the bots, worry about getting ahead by the bots first, and you can if you're able to effectively handle the bots, you can probably kill Teemo. Even after Teemo spawns, it's the bots that are actually the issue because they keep fighting you, right? It's not like they disappear or anything. Now you can run into the situation where your team is lacking in terms of sort of essentially damage, and then you can't deal with the Teemo, which is a bit weird if you're actually able to beat level 100 bots. But I mean, just to make sure that doesn't happen, you can just make sure you have any kind of shred champion on your team. So particularly like percentage shred stuff. Usually it's like an AD carry type, but even Brand can do quite well in that regards. But Kog'Maw is probably the best at it that I've seen. He's like really, really good at that because of his fast shredding attacks. Aside from that, you can also take Smite if you can get away with it. You can smite the Teemo. So yeah, really anything though that's like good at killing Baron really quickly will be good at killing Teemo. Now, granted, a lot of things that are good at killing Baron you can't actually use in this mode. Well, you can use them, but they suck fighting against the bot, so it's a bit complicated. But yeah, that's the basic overview. Now, as for slightly more specific points in terms of how to deal with the level 100 Doom bots, keep in mind that the bulk of my experience actually comes with the old level 100 Doom bots, which have since been made stronger. However, what I've actually found is that the point, because I was going to make a video and then discovered, oh wait, right, changed some stuff. They're just harder now. The points that I was going to make are actually even more applicable, given that everything the Doom bots do at level 100 is simply more extreme than what it was before. So all the essentially the minimum requirements, or basically the things you had to do, become even more non-negotiable. So like basically this stuff has to be done, all like it actually has to be done before you could kind of, there was a bit more leeway. Now it has to be done and needs to be done even better, kind of thing, in my experience. So the new bots I only had about 2 hours with, but again, I found everything more or less the same. We came actually quite close to beating them, even with very suboptimal conditions where the things I'm going to outline weren't actually really being done. So yeah, this is definitely doable. I see this. We'll probably beat this probably in the next couple of days, I imagine, as long as we can get a pretty good crew to do it. But yeah, the first thing to note is that Doombot, the mode itself, is a lot more mechanically mechanical skill intensive than base League of Legends. Base League of Legends is actually not all that mechanically difficult. It's actually, in the grand scheme of gaming, it's fairly simple. Where the difficulty comes in is sort of game knowledge, sort of, and stuff like that. So, a lot of games in League of Legends, like the normal game, it will kind of depend on your general game knowledge, strategy, prioritization of what you want to do on the map, how certain matchups work, and it's kind of knowing stuff like that. In this mode, it's just almost pure mechanics, really. Like, I mean, obviously you need a baseline understanding of what the skills do and what items probably you should get, kind of stuff. But if anything, like sort of your muscle memory and game knowledge is so non-applicable or just essentially warped a lot of the time, it can almost work against you because you'll try and dodge a Morgana Q like you normally would and realize, oh wait a minute, it's faster, longer, and then there's 3 of them that shoot out sideways. So it's almost like you kind of need to develop Doombot specific game knowledge. If knowledge is to be applied to this mode. But yeah, basically there's just so much crap flying around all the time that you actually do need to be fairly decent in terms of your reactionary skill, predictive skill, and so just general awareness and stuff like that. That's really important. Now, in terms of how much skill you actually need to win, I'm going to use MMR/tier as a shorthand. I don't like doing this, but it's the easiest way to explain it. So keep in mind this isn't an absolute, absolute, and I'm using it for the sake of convenience, and I'm well aware that X, tier doesn't mean Y skill and that kind of stuff. But I would say roughly, in terms of being able to consistently beat the bots under ideal conditions and then everyone's playing properly, probably about mid-platinum is what you want for a full crew. Now, keep in mind I said mechanics, not necessarily MMR tier exactly. You can have a really good game. You can rather have really good game knowledge, but garbage mechanics, vice versa as well. And so this also means actual skill, not where you happen to be at the time in terms of your current rating or whatever. You can beat them at lower, certainly. For example, I think I gave a very brief, or I hinted an example earlier where I actually did fairly well against the new level 100 Doom bots, and I came really close to beating it, even with I think the squad was mostly like somewhere between diamond and silver-ish, aside from me. So again, it's not an absolute. So just kind of a rough shorthand I'm using there. Um, Now, the problem, however, is again, if you're kind of going into the lower tier squad, is that the mechanics need to be consistent both on an individual level and on sort of an across the board level. Simply because what a lot of the bots do tends to chain off and gets everyone killed if one person screws up, kind of thing. Like it's very easy to get caught by one thing, especially for example, you're probably seeing in the background here. This is kind of whatever game I'm running. Lux hits one person with her binding, then the binding shoots in every direction. Everyone gets hit. Then Lux will hit her ult, and then everyone dies. Or someone gets hit with one piece of CC, and then another AoE CC will come in from behind that and hit multiple people, and everyone gets wiped, kind of thing. So you almost have to. It's not exactly the same, but the principle is very similar to imagining that the entire enemy team is essentially kind of like they're all reset assassins almost. So it's just like if one person screws up, then everyone gets chained off and screwed over as well. So it's to use a very cliched phrase, your team is only as strong as your weakest link, or in this case, the mechanically weakest person. So yeah, that's kind of it in terms of these sorts of specifics. I'm going to move on to like even more specific stuff now in terms of like what's actually good in this mode and what's actually bad and why. Ranged, AoE, artillery. Those are the three keys to beating level 100 Doombots. Now, in terms of very specific champions that are good at that, I mean, imagine you can come up with a list on your own. But I found the absolute top tier, the cream of the crop stuff to pick, tends to be Xerath, Brand, Azir to an extent, Vel'Koz, Ziggs, and Victor. Those are all really good. Brand is probably actually the best, and oddly enough, he's not quite as long range as some of those other guys, but I mean, he's good because of his whole explodey AoE stuff and percent damage and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very good versus the bots. Other things that are good, but I found not quite as good for various reasons, but still doable, are stuff like Anivia, Orianna, Syndra, Zyra, Urgot. I've seen Cassiopeia and Swain do all right. They're a bit short range. I mean, they kind of got away with stuff better, I feel, in slightly lower Doombot modes, but Doombot level 100 is probably a bit difficult for them to deal with. Some AD carries also really good. Again, the more range, the better. In general, also wave clear is quite nice. The aforementioned mages are very good at wave clear. Some AD carries are good at wave clear. Others are not so much. Caitlyn and Jinx are probably in terms of the basic AD carries, the best at dealing with the bots. Caitlyn can actually solo the bots right off the bat from level 100 bots in the mid lane. This is what I was doing here. So long as you don't get super unlucky with both the matchup and the curses you tend to get. I was doing it here, and unfortunately I was kind of joking to myself. So long as I get anything but Ethereal or the Pantheon passive, I'll be able to take out this guy fine. And you notice, of course, I think the two things he actually got, the first two things he got were the Ethereal passive, where he just goes and he phases out of existence and you can't deal damage to him, and the Pantheon thing, which just completely screws over the Caitlyn's mode of damage, especially against the bots because they don't know how to deal with traps, which I'll get into in a moment. But yeah, you just he kind of harasses you, and you can't harass him back because of the damn Pantheon passive, which just keeps showing up. Well, what else is good? I think I've made a list here. Oh, right. Sivir, Twitch, Varus, depending on how to pronounce it, and Sivir, Twitch, Varus, and Tristana can do all right. They wouldn't be my first choices, but I've seen them do well. Kog'Maw is an interesting pick because it takes a while for him to scale into what you need him to be, but he's incredibly good at shredding down the bots and Teemo, or the Teemo boss at the end. He's probably, again, I think I mentioned it earlier, he's like the best Teemo shredding thing I've encountered. And bots in general, it's like the shredding power is incredibly potent. The problem with, of course, Kog'Maw is, I guess it's a little bit like AP Kog'Maw in normal games. He's just not going to do very much for you in the early game, and so the rest of your team really needs to be able to pick up the slack and just sort of carry him through to the point where he can just kind of start shredding everything down. Skirmishy, sort of kite-based AD carries aren't as good because they're about kiting and less about just sort of brute force damage. And since the bots are designed to basically relentlessly push forward, you can kite backwards all day, but ultimately you're eventually just going to run out of places to run to because they're going to be pushed into your base. and you're simply not going to have the damage to push them back and keep them away, away from doing that. So examples of that would be like Ezreal. I've seen hasn't basically Ezreal has never done well in any of these games that I've seen him on my team with. What's another one? I wouldn't play Quinn. I wouldn't really even play Corki either. Like, yeah, no, Corki I wouldn't do. Aside from that, we have stuff that generally confuses AI is really good. I've mentioned this sort of briefly with the traps, but it's kind of weird. I'm not sure like what the exact rule is in terms of what they're good at dealing with and what they're not good at dealing with, because it's not exactly sort of placed AOE per se, because some things are good at dealing and some things are not, and there doesn't seem to be too much of a rhyme or reason to it. For example, Urgot's E, they don't know how to dodge, and then you get your full Q combo over and over again, so they don't know how to deal with that. Oh yeah, did I mention Urgot? Urgot's actually not bad in this mode either. Xerath W, they don't know how to dodge. Or his ult, the Aesir soldiers, they'll just sit in that. So anything that's placed in the ground, they'll tend to sit in it a lot. Any sort of trap, they'll just walk straight. Well, it's weird. They'll sometimes walk straight into it, and sometimes they'll just kind of skirt around it. So I don't know what the actual AI read is on the trap, but they generally tend to step on stuff. However, they're actually really, really good at dodging certain other types of skills, and I'm not sure what the deal is. For example, Xerath Q, they're really good at dodging it. They just tend to like do that. It looks like, I mean, it is scripting because they're bots. I mean, but it looks like a scripted dodge where they'll just like shuffle a pixel out of the range, and all the bots will do that. So they're all kind of like hugging the radius of it and just don't take the damage. Despite that, Xerath is still very good, but also anything again with percent damage is going to perform exceptionally well, since the bots have horrendous amounts of HP. So aforementioned Brand, that's one of the things that makes him really good. We've already talked about Kog'Maw. So just, if you can work percentage damage in, unfortunately a lot of the bots that are good at fighting them are not going to have percentage damage, but again, if you can work it in there, it's like a fantastic tool. Now, in terms of what does really poorly against the bots, those can be broken down into two relatively large categories, and all comes down to range in the end again. But people probably heard about the fact that melee is not very good, so we'll just go over the easier category first, or the more straightforward one. And yes, melee is, generally speaking, quite bad against these things. Basically, melee is, it can't get in because it'll get poked out before it has a chance to do so. Even if the melee gets kind of close, they'll probably just get CC'd at close range and then killed there. And even if they don't get CC'd to death and close and get their damage off, they probably can't out-trade the bots anyway, because the bots will out-damage them, and then they'll back off, and then they'll just heal up better than you. So yeah, basically you just can't out-trade them going for shot, which is the kind of thing that melees tend to be good at. Now, you can use certain types of melees sometimes. I've done it before. For example, you can use, I have actually used in the past, a full tank, and I don't think it's a terrible strategy. It's probably harder to pull off. And granted, keep in mind, this was in the older Doombots 100. I don't know if the new Doombots 100, if you can still, I mean, you probably can still do this if the players are good enough. But what I would do is I would go like a full tank champion, for example, like, I've seen other players do it as well, but I went like full tank Alawi, just kind of went in the middle and did the tentacle slam on them and just kind of healed up. So I would be able to tank them and sort of cluster the bots, and then the rest of my team would just dump horrendous amounts of AoE onto them. For example, like the Brand ult would go off, Vel'Koz would start shooting into them. And so in that sense, that could work, but again, it requires that your team is able to just deal horrendous amounts of damage while you don't do quite as much. And so it puts a lot of strain on them. But, if you're going into it with a plan, it's a plan, I suppose. You can also get away with some melee stuff to an extent. Again, this was also in the old Doombots 100. I don't know if I could still do this, but I was on Jarvan. And Jarvan's a bit of an extreme case because, I main Jarvan. I'm way better at Jarvan than any other character. So I know exactly when to go in, when not to go in, like how much damage I'm going to do. That's all just kind of like, it's set in stone in my brain. It's very difficult for me to screw up. So I was able to just kind of like really bide my time and go in at the right time and just sort of burst them down exactly when I could, kind of thing. It was still very difficult, and and I had a much easier time of it using champions that I'm less experienced with, for example, like Xerath and stuff like that. But it is doable in a sense. But also keep in mind, you can, at best, I would put 1 melee on a team. Anything more than 2 would be way too much of a strain. And even 1, I'm kind of, I would shy away against, but there you have it. I mean, they can do it. In terms of the category champion that's slightly more weird, that's also, or slightly straightforward, that's also not very good in this mode, arguably worse in this mode than just sort of the straight up melee, who does have the option of going tank and being somewhat useful, is sort of like the mid-range skirmisher type. Or basically anything that has to kind of like stay mid-range and typically does well by out-dueling people. So stuff like Vayne, or the shorter range AD carries and stuff like that. Ryze would fit into that category. I made a list here somewhere. Let me see if I can find that. I think I put Quinn in there, but I've mentioned Quinn in the past. Well, basically, anyway, stuff like that. It was a long enough list, I suppose. Those basically, the longer you stay at that mid range, the more you risk, rather, the sort of anyone hitting you with any kind of CC or really anything. And in this mode, basically getting hit by anything when you're squishy tends to mean death, or in best case scenario, half your HP is just all of a sudden gone. And again, like, if you were the tankier champs from before, or the aforementioned tankier champs who are not good in this mode, at least you could maybe survive. The mid-range champions just kind of die and don't really get to do their damage, and even if they do, they're not going to out-trade anyone. Oh, I see. I have a cup in the way, that's why I can't see the list. So yeah, that's really all there is to that in terms of what's good and what's not. It's a bit limiting, but I'm not sure how you would balance the game mode, or around making melee better. But you more or less basically just need to have horrendous amounts of super long range damage, and sort of the key points being artillery range, AoE, and artillery. So there you have it. And once again, I'm off to go try and apply these principles in an actual game. So if you're interested in playing on the PB, you have a PB account, and you just happen to catch this video right after I upload it, please feel free to sign on to the PB server and send a friend request to Conrad space I or Conrad the Third, and I'll basically be just inviting viewers, and we'll try and get this done in an organized manner and see if we can beat the actual Doombots level 100.